Namaste everyone, welcome back to CodeCraft with Poonam. I am your coding mentor Poonam Agrawal. In the previous video, we built a real database backed REST API using Spring Data JPA and HTO. Right? So today we make that API smarter and kinder when things go wrong. So imagine a customer orders a recipe that does not exist or submits bad data. Then what will happen? Then then Spring might show a messy stack trace or return a generic error. So in this video, we are going to turn those into clear, friendly error response. Okay, so for your better understanding, I have already given you an example of each of the layers. Like controller layer is just like a waiter, okay, and service layer is just like the head chef and in this video we are going to add one more file, okay, that is exception. So here an exception is an accident in the kitchen. Okay, so here we are going to use at the rate controller advice. Okay, so we it is just like a restaurant manager who handles incidents and reports them nicely. Okay, so here in this video, we are going to learn what is Java exception and why it matters in REST APIs, and how to throw custom exceptions from the service layer, and how this at the rate controller advice catches exceptions globally, and how to return structured JSON error responses, and also how to map exceptions to HTTP status code like 404, 400, etc. Okay. So now coming to why global exception handling. So for the global exception handling, here we are using at the rate controller advice. Okay. So if you don't use this annotation, that is at the rate controller advice, then for example, if a user wants some recipe, okay, and for that he will give some recipe ID. Okay. So if that recipe ID is missing, then what will happen? Then the service throws an exception and the user sees what? An ugly stack traces, default HTML error pages, and inconsistent API behavior. Okay, so if you go with this annotation is at the rate controller advice, then we can catch exceptions in one place and return. Unlike in our previous videos, we have used try catch blocks, right, to handle the exceptions, right? But here, what we are going to do is here we are using global exception handler. So here in this video, we will catch all the exceptions in one place and return. Okay, so what it will return if there is an exception, then here it will return a clear message with the right HTTP status code and a consistent response format. Okay, so here you can see that without at the rate controller advice, what will happen is user sees ugly stack when there is an exception. Then user sees an ugly stack traces, that is all the raw technical details of the errors are exposed. Okay, and there may be inconsistent API behavior. That means the HTTP status code returned are not standardized, and there may be default HTML error pages, that is generic and unhelpful error pages are displayed which users don't understand, and it will be difficult to debug and understand. So the lack of because the lack of structured error handling hinders debugging. Okay, so if you use this at the rate controller advice, then user can see a clear message when an exception occurs. Okay. So here a user friendly explanation of the problem is provided. And then here it will provide the right HTTP status code. So here appropriate HTTP status codes are returned for errors. Okay. So that you can easily understand that what type of error has occurred. Okay, and then a consistent response format. So here all error responses follow a predictable structure. So this makes beginner friendly and easy to debug. So here we will have a structured error handling which simplifies debugging and onboarding. Okay. Now coming to exception flow. So here, when a request arrives from a user, okay, so it will call the recipe service and then it will validate the data. If the data is valid, then it will return a normal data. Okay. If data is not valid, then it will throw an exception. Okay. So that exception may be a recipe not found exception, duplicate recipe exception, illegal argument exception. So here these exceptions are custom exceptions. Okay, so these exceptions are based on our project. Okay, so here we are using food app, right? So here for that we are using recipe. So here we have this custom made exceptions related to our recipe. That is, when a user enters a recipe which is not present, right, then this recipe not found exception will be thrown. Okay, so you can have the custom exceptions based on your project. Okay, and if there is no exception is thrown, then it will return this normal data. Okay, so here you can see that these exceptions are thrown, right? Then what will happen? The exception travels out of the controller, right? And then we have a separate file for this exception handling. Okay, where we have annotated that class with the at the rate controller advice, so that file that will catch this exception. Okay, so which exception? This custom exceptions. Okay, and then a JSON error response is returned. So here this recipe not found exception is thrown when the requested recipe is not in the database, right? So this will map to a 404 not found. Okay. And here we have this duplicate recipe exception. So this is thrown when a recipe with the same name already exists. So the which type of status it will give? It will give us 400 bad request. Okay, and then here we have this illegal argument exception. So this is thrown when request data is invalid. So this will give us 400 bad request. Okay. So if you missed my core Java series, okay, then you can check all that videos. And also in that series, I have covered this exception topic, okay, exception handling. So you can watch that exception handling video so that you will have a better clarity, okay, and complete understanding of exception handling, okay. So here, a good API should tell you what went wrong. Okay, when you go and debug, you should able to trace it, right? So if you provide proper message, then you will able to handle it. So a good API should tell you what went wrong, not just that something failed. Okay. So with at the rate to controller advice, we make error handling centralized, reusable, easy to explain, and easy to debug. Got it? So now we will walk through the code. So here you can see that in this recipe service, we have this controller layer, model layer, repository layer and service layer, right? But here I have added one more thing, that is exception folder. Okay, in this folder I have all these custom exceptions. Okay, this is Java file, right? So here we have API error response.java. This is our custom exceptions, that is duplicate recipe exception.java, recipe not found exception.java. Okay, and this is global exception handler. Okay, so first go to the service here. Here you can see that recipe service.java. So here you can notice that this one. So I'm following the same example, same code base, okay, but bit of changes. Okay, like in our previous session, we have used this try catch block, right, for exception handling. But in this session, I am using the centralized exception, that is global exception handler. Okay, here we have all the custom exceptions. Okay, so if you missed my all the previous videos, then you can watch all the sessions of the Spring Boot. Okay. So here we have this public class recipe service. Okay, so here you can see that this is all everything is same. Okay, there is no changes in this. So here there is no changes. Okay, the only changes is here I have added this exception. Okay, in controller layer I have not added any try catch blocks. Okay, I have removed all the try catch block from the controller layer. In previous session we have used try catch block in our controller, right? But in this session I have removed all the try catch block. Okay, and I have a separate folder for the exception. Okay, so here coming to this recipe service.java here. So here what will happen is the service layer throw a custom exceptions. Okay, so here the service layer still validates the business rules. There is no changes. Here recipe cannot, here recipe name cannot be blank. Cook time must be positive. Duplicate recipe names are not allowed, right? So here if a rule fails, then the service throws a specific exception like recipe not found exception, duplicate recipe exception, illegal argument exception. Okay. So this keeps the controller simple and moves error decisions to the service. Okay. So here you can see that our recipe controller is clean and neat, right? Without any try catch blocks. So here the controller simply forwards request to the service. So no try catch logic is needed here because the global handler will take care of errors. Okay. So now coming to this global exception handler.java. Okay, this is in exception folder. I have created separate folder for this exception. Okay, so here you can see that we have this public class global exception handler. So this is annotated with at the rest controller advice. Okay, so here in this you can see that we have this method that is public response entity. That is public response entity. This is api error response. Okay, so here you can see that api error response dot java. This is an another file. Okay, so here where we have all this like state, this is timestamp. Okay, but status, error, message, path. Okay, at what time an error occurred and which type of status it is, http status. Okay, and what type of error it is, proper message, and the path from where it occurred. Okay, so here we are going to return a proper message. Okay, so here you can see that this is our constructor. Okay, here api error response. Here also, this is default constructor and this is our parameterized constructor. Okay, and this is all our getter setter methods. Okay, so here coming back, this is our global exception handler. Okay, in this we have this public response entity. So we are using this API error response. Okay, here. And this is our method name that is handle recipe not found. Okay, so when a recipe not found, then then that will be handled by this method. Okay, so here what we have given inside this parameters, recipe not found exception. Okay, and this is http servlet request. So in this method we have this, we are creating this new api error response. Okay, where we are giving this http status. Okay, error, message, and the path. Okay, so this will return whole body, that is response entity dot status with status code. Okay, dot body error. Okay, and then this is an another method for the another type of custom exception. Okay, that is handle duplicate recipe. Okay, this is for duplicate recipe exception. So here also you can see that public response entity api error handle. Here we have given this parameters, that is duplicate recipe exception and http servlet request. Okay, so here another api error response is created with the status code, error, message, request. Okay, this will return whole body with proper message status and status. Okay, so here also you can see that this method is annotated with at the rate exception handler. So in the here we are mentioning this name. Okay, which type of exception handler it is, that is here duplicate recipe exception dot class. Okay, here you can see this one. So here we have this class, public class duplicate recipe exception, which extends runtime exception. Okay. So here you can see that public duplicate recipe exception. Here we are providing this message. And then here we have used the super message. This will call the parent. Okay. So here you can see that here this is for the recipe not found exception. Okay. For this we have a separate class. This one. This is the class. Okay. For that type of exception, that is public class recipe not found exception extends runtime exception. Yeah, this is the constructor. Okay. And then here we have another exception handler for illegal argument exception. Okay. And then this is our exception dot class. Okay. So here public response entity API error response handle generic exception. This is for the generic exception. So for the generic ones, here we are calling this exception dot class. Okay. So here what we are doing, here we have exception and HTTP servlet request. Okay, same thing here. So we are creating a new API error response where we have the status, HTTP status as internal server error. So what this will give, this will give us 500. Okay. So error and then proper message and the path. Okay. So here we are printing this tag trace, and this will return with the proper status and message, proper body and status code. Okay. So here, what do you mean by this at the rate REST controller advice? So here, this at the rate controller advice is a combination of at the rate controller advice and at the rate response body. At the rate response body. Okay. So here this allows you to it allows you to handle exceptions globally across all controllers and automatically returns response in JSON format. Okay. So why we use it? Why? Because here, as I already told you, that we use here for the centralized exception handling, for the clean controllers and consistent API error response. Okay, so this will avoid try catch in every controller and code doesn't becomes repetitive and messy. Okay, so here we annotated this class with the at the rate controller advice, right? So it will catch exceptions and returns API error response objects. Okay. So here this API error response is nothing but it is a consistent JSON structure. Okay. As I told you, it will give us this timestamp, status, error, message, and path. Okay. So that we can here easily track what happened and where. Okay. So now we will start the application and we'll check all our APIs. Okay. So here go to this recipe service application.java. Okay. This is our main method. So run this. Here you can see that application got started. Here you can see Tomcat started on port 8080 and started recipe service application. Okay. So this application got started. Okay. So now open the web browser or else you can use Postman. Okay, Postman or web browser. Okay, for the get method. If you want to test the API for the post, then you need to have a Postman, right? So now we will test an API to get all the recipes. Okay. So first go to localhost, this one. Already we have 8080/API/recipes. Okay. So here I'm testing for the get right now to get all the recipes. Okay. So click on this send. So here you can see we have. So here you can see that we have all the recipes. Okay. One, two. So now as you know that here we have three recipes, right? Now we will check for the recipe, okay, based on the ID. So slash, we will give some ID, okay, some 9, okay, and click on send. So now see what message you got here. Timestamp, status, error, message, and path, right? Now we have created a centralized exception handling, okay. So in the API response, So in the API error response, we have given all these fields, right? That is timestamp, status, error, message path. Okay, so all these details we got it here. So in our previous sessions, we didn't have a proper exception format, right? So in this session, you can see that we have a proper format. Okay. So now we are going to test for the post. Okay, here we will try to add duplicate recipe. Okay, so here click on post, click on the body, here raw. Okay, and then here I am going to paste this paneer butter masala. Already this recipe we have, right? But again I'm trying to add this same recipe. Okay, that is duplicate recipe. So now we will see what type of error, what type of message we will get. Okay, so for that here we need to, so here this is our local host colon 8080 slash API slash recipes. Okay, so we are going to add same recipe in our this recipes. Okay, so when you click on send, see here what type of error you got here. So here you can see you got this timestamp, status, error, message, path, right? So all these things we have already provided in our API error response, right? So where we have all these fields, right? So here we got this timestamp status as 400. Which type of error it is? Bad request. Here you got this message, that is recipe paneer butter masala already exists. So this message, from where you got this, we have provided this message for this type of error in a global exceptional handler. Okay, so from there it picked this message for this type of error and it got displayed here. And this is our path. Okay, so here go to this global exception handler. Okay, so so this is for the duplicate exception. So here you got the message recipe service. Okay, from here. So here you can see that, yeah, add recipes method. Okay, so here when you try to add duplicate recipe, here you can see throw new duplicate recipe exception. Here we have provided this message recipe. This will pick up that recipe name. Okay, so this is dynamic, right? And then here already existed. Okay, so paneer recipe paneer butter masala already existed. So this is for today's video. If you liked my teaching, then do let me know through comment and hit the like button and share it with your circle so that it will be helpful to them. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you will not miss any of my videos. Till then, keep learning, keep growing. This is Poonam Agrawal from CodeCraft with Poonam signing off.